Well, hello and welcome back to another exciting edition of Coffee with Stephen. So, this week's blog is entitled Emergency Regulations, and it is befuddling the level of stupidity and arrogance that seems to have found a nexus point. Let's go and unpack this. I'm going to tell you some things that the Department of Justice has done, which is unbelievably misguided. And then we're going to follow that up with an action taken by the Riverside County Sheriff's Department that honestly should probably result in somebody going to jail. Okay, so let's begin with what the Department of Justice did. SB2, which is currently being challenged, okay? SB2 has a number of different components attached to it. Obviously, a lot of play has been spent looking at all of the sensitive locations that the state is trying to argue exist, that you cannot go with a firearm. But part of SB2 was a training component, and there was an enhancement requirement. You had to go through, instead of a minimum of 8 hours, it had to be a minimum of 16 hours, and for an initial CCW, and a minimum of 8 hours for a renewal. And then this sort of bizarre mental health hour, which could be taught by anybody and could be, focused on anything as long as there was some nexus to mental health. So don't even get me started on that one. But with all of this, there was also a thing in the regulation that said that training providers could continue to be, essentially identified by the issuing agencies, by the local sheriff, or by some other form of regulation. And that's the kicker. So the Department of Justice said, let's go ahead and create a new type of Department of Justice instructor. We'll call this person the DOJ CCW training instructor, and will really narrow who can potentially be a CCW trainer. So forget the fact that there have been hundreds of CCW trainers throughout California for a number of years, all providing high quality education. We are going to go ahead and we're going to come up with these 3 independent groups, and don't get me started on the quality levels of these groups either, but we'll come up with these 3 independent groups. And, by the way, we'll make this an emergency legislation so that, technically speaking, it will go into effect January 1. Now, keep in mind, it's physically impossible for someone to become a CCW training provider based on the timeline of when DOJ decided to promulgate these regulations. They could have promulgated these regulations way back in August, giving everybody the opportunity to do this. They chose to wait till 2 weeks before the new year. I think this is going to be shot down. Now, moving on to Riverside. So most issuing agencies looked at this and said, wow, really, really stupid idea, DOJ. Probably not going to be found to be an emergency. So, this might go into effect at some point in the future, but we're not terribly concerned about it right at this very moment. Now, within the regulations that were proposed, that were sent to the Office of Administrative Law, and look, I know I'm getting really wonky on this. Suffice to say, the governing institution that would say, yes, Department of Justice, will go ahead and we'll make this into an actual piece of legislation, or a piece of regulation, rather. When they put it over, they put it in as an emergency regulation. They also said that because this is so extraordinarily important to do, immediately, there will be a 5-day comment period. Now, that 5-day comment period begins not when DOJ publishes their guidelines. That 5-day comment period begins when the Office of Administrative Law publishes those guidelines. Pardon me. For reasons that are completely unclear, the Riverside County Sheriff's Department decided that the 5 days began tolling the minute DOJ announced that they were going to do this. More importantly, Riverside made the decision that at the conclusion of those 5 days, the law was now in effect. That the comment period served nothing more than to allow people to air their grievances, but it was already a foregone conclusion. Whoever made this decision is, and I say this with absolutely no respect, whoever made this decision on the part of the Riverside County Sheriff's Department is a moron, okay? First of all, it's just flat out wrong. Secondly, it has displaced hundreds of people. There were a number of people that had signed up in Riverside for CCW training classes so that they could get their permits in line. The Riverside County Sheriff's CCW licensing unit basically came out and said, well, we're not going to accept training certificates as of right now from all of these licensed CCW training providers. Now, a number of people have called this individual at Riverside. I actually don't know his name, other than the fact that I know he happens to be a male. But a number of them have called saying, you can't do this. And his attitude is basically, screw you, I can do whatever I want. The level of hubris and authoritarianism is absolutely staggering. One of my good friends, who happens to be a CCW coordinator and a sheriff's deputy in Solano County, contacted him and said, this isn't right. And he said, no, this is the law. And he happened to bring up the fact that, does it occur to you that no other sheriff's department in the state of California is doing this? Is that not a little bit of a red flag to you? Anyways, I do encourage you, whether you live in Riverside or not, definitely contact the Riverside County Sheriff's Department and ask them what the F is going on. They are acting in a manner that is tyrannical, it's abusive, it's arbitrary, it's capricious, it's completely contrary to the stated position of an elected sheriff, Bianco, in Riverside, who claims to be pro-Second Amendment. Something needs to be done here, and it needs to be done immediately. I know there are a number of advocacy groups that not only are targeting SB2, not only are targeting these administrative laws, but are also targeting these absolutely asinine moves on the part of the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. All right, with all that being said, as always, train constantly, train consistently, train repetitively, and train with purpose. Above all else, stay safe.